Hey everyone, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott Saunders, talking all about Manchester United. This episode today, I wasn't anticipating to do for a good few weeks yet until the season had finished, until we had some kind of definitive news on where teams were finishing. Aston Villa, I'm actually talking about in this case. But what we have learned today is that Marcus Rashford is set to be out for the rest of the season with a hamstring injury. And of course, that means that his loan at Aston Villa might well be over. So I'm going to talk about whether this loan deal has worked, whether Manchester United's loan deal option and whether the decision to go down that route has worked out for them, whether it will work out for them, the chances that Aston Villa have of actually making this deal permanent, options that Marcus Rashford might have elsewhere, and whether United can actually go about raising the 40-odd million quid that they wanted to raise when they put an option in the transfer when it was confirmed for Aston Villa to potentially buy him this summer. Marcus Rashford, obviously, I'm sure pretty upset to be missing the next 3 games or whatever it is for Aston Villa, because Villa play at Old Trafford on the final day of the season, and obviously Marcus Rashford cannot play in that game due to a clause in the loan deal, but it seems like he won't be playing any more games for Villa at all. So that's what I'm going to be talking about on this show today. Get in touch in the comments. I'm back on YouTube today. Get in touch with the comments to let me know whether you think Marcus Rashford actually has a future at Manchester United, if there's any kind of turning point that could happen, if he could come back and potentially show that he could fill in that number 9 role, which United are sorely lacking a bit of potency from, because he's been playing there for Aston Villa ahead of Ollie Watkins as well, which I'm sure not many of us would have ever really anticipated happening. But yeah, plenty to talk about Marcus Rashford, so let me know in the comment section. Get in the comments on Spotify as well. I've only just realized over the last few days that I can get involved in the comments by signing up properly on Spotify, and I can start replying to you guys. So sorry if I've not been in touch previously. But please get in touch on there. Give a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify as well. Follow me on social media at _Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok too. I want to come back and potentially go daily. I've got to be honest. The season is looking like it's coming to an end. I think there's plenty to talk about. There will be plenty to talk about over the course of the season as well, and over the course of the off season as well. So fingers crossed, United can go win the Europa League and have more money to go and rebuild their squad. But let's see how it goes. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about Marcus Rashford today. I've got other topics to come this week. I'm sure there's lots of talk ahead of the game with Athletic. I'm sure we might get some developments potentially on any developments on strikers with Liam Delap and Ipswich getting relegated. Victor Osimhen speculations going around all the time. Mateus Cunha, there could be some movement on that deal this week as well. So I'm sure I'll have plenty to talk about. But please subscribe on all platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and follow me on social media as well. Anyway, so I do want to talk about Rashford because he has been out of the picture at Manchester United since the day before the Manchester derby, I think, when Ahmad scored that late goal to win the game in December. Hell of a long time ago now. He then spent about 12 or 13 matches just completely out of the picture. Ruben Amorim has been asked about him consistently when he was at Manchester United, and now he's away from Manchester United as well. Rashford has come into Aston Villa after essentially Amorim had said that he's not giving me the attitude that I want to see. And that means that he ended up, being cast aside. Garnacho was in the same situation at that point, but did work his way back into the team by showing the attitude that I think Amorim wanted to see. And whatever happens with Garnacho in the summer, I do believe that there's some real potential for him to end up leaving the club as well in the summer. But maybe that goes to suggest that now this deal for Marcus Rashford with Aston Villa has come to an end, or we'll see what happens with Villa and if they do end up signing him. But it does suggest that there may actually be potentially a path back for Marcus Rashford if something changes and if Ruben Amorim sees something different in Marcus Rashford. But I will say from the outset here, I make that pretty unlikely. I would be really, really surprised to see Marcus Rashford coming back in and playing for Manchester United again. That's just how it stands at the moment. Of course, I'm not saying that this is going to be the absolute end, but it looks more than likely at the moment that Manchester United's preference here is to end up selling him, and that the loan deal that Aston Villa took up, I think this has worked. I actually do think this has worked. And as much as there's been discussion around if, I think everything that Rashford has done in a Villa shirt, the fact that he scored, I think his record is 4 goals and 6 assists from 17 games. So 10 goal contributions in 17 games. He got an assist, obviously, in the Champions League against PSG. He scored a penalty against Manchester City and hit the post in his last appearance for them as well. And he, like I say, he ousted Ollie Watkins, which I don't think anybody could really have anticipated would have happened when he signed. I think we all looked at this deal and thought he'll potentially end up on one of the wings. But as it turns out, he's taken the place of Ollie Watkins through the middle, to the point where Ollie Watkins is now publicly coming out and speaking to media and saying he's really annoyed that he's lost his place and he's only playing 20-minute patches in big, massive Champions League matches against PSG after all he has done to get Aston Villa to that point of playing in the Champions League. So I think United looked at this situation in January and thought, we have an asset here that is earning 300k a week, or it's there's speculation on what the exact number is, but he is one of United's highest earners alongside Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes. Signed that deal if I remember rightly, the summer before last, or at some point he was given a massive pay increase when his stock was pretty high after that 30-goal season that he had put in under Erik ten Hag. But everything from there seemed to just go down the toilet, essentially. So United had looked at that after Amorim he said it in a press conference last week that it was his decision to ship out Marcus Rashford. He had essentially told the team in terms of transfers that he hadn't been seeing the required effort that he wanted to see out of Marcus Rashford. Anthony had the same fate. Whether that was a quality thing or an attitude thing is not entirely clear, but he's been loaned out as well. And I do think that United have looked at the situation that they found themselves in with two players that they have either signed for massive expense or have given a massive contract to, and they have decided to ship these players out on loan in order to restore their reputation. And I think what you can say with both Marcus Rashford and Anthony in this case is that both loan deals have actually worked. United's intention was to send those players out to repair the reputations that they had found themselves having because they'd lost their places respectively in the United team, because the performances that they were putting in when they were playing for United weren't deemed up to standard. And I am aware that there are probably people listening to this or watching this that think Marcus Rashford was wrongly exiled from this United team. Completely fair and valid opinion. For me personally, I feel like he had a place in the team that was maybe he was getting it on reputation. I think something needed to happen. He maybe was seen as like an undroppable for a long period of time. Something needed to happen, and I think he needed to have essentially rattle the cage a little bit. And I think maybe needed something different. He then told Henry Winter in January that he wanted a new challenge. And the Villa deal came about, even though there was interest from some other clubs. I don't think this Aston Villa transfer was the one that he anticipated actually getting when it came around. I think he was hoping for something bigger and a bigger club, maybe in another country, to come calling for him. But as it stood, this Villa deal was the only one really on the table worth a damn. And Villa took him on. As I say, Unai Emery has played him and preferred him to Ollie Watkins. He scored 4 goals and got 6 assists from 17 matches. And generally, I think if you look at where Marcus Rashford is now and how that 17 games has gone for him in general versus where he was when he wasn't in the United team, you can now say, when there were debates happening, when Marcus Rashford wasn't playing that well or delivering for United, what is his valuation? I think United have put that option in that Villa deal for around 40 million quid. And I think as it stands, the way that Rashford has been playing over the course of the last few months, that now looks a fair price. Whether United will actually get that from elsewhere remains to be seen, but Rashford has really repaired his reputation to a certain degree. And I think to the point now where other clubs who were maybe on the fence about signing him in January, when transfers are obviously a lot more difficult to pull off, they'll probably look at this in a summer transfer window where it's far easier to ship players in and out. It's far easier to, plan for your squad, this kind of thing. I do think that Marcus Rashford has more of a market for himself now to leave United permanently than he did in January, just because of the difficulties that January transfer windows bring about with them. So, yeah, I think he's shown improvement in a fair few areas. I do think that there's some bad habits in Rashford's game, which he was showing at United that I've seen have stayed there since I was watching. When I've been watching him, like such as there are times where I think he kind of gets the ball on the left side, stops, tries to beat a man, and ends up losing the ball. And then, he doesn't always track back. And I think that can be potentially damaging for the team that he's playing for. But I do think there's been elements of success with what he's tried to do. And I think he has really showed with his position in this Villa team that he is still judged as maybe a level above what Villa had previously, even though it hadn't seemed like that when he was playing for United, because everybody loves to, stick the boot into United and say that all their players are absolute trash because they're not delivering. You only need to look at Scott McTominay and the fact that he is absolutely tearing it up in Serie A to show that one year ago or 2 years ago, when not everybody, because I know that there's a lot of people who really back Scott McTominay, and I am, for one, I'm so glad that he's doing so well at Napoli at the moment. He was a source of massive, massive criticism among the United fan base. He wasn't utilized properly maybe you could argue that he was towards the end when he was coming on and scoring goals in last-minute winners or last-minute equalizers for United in his final season at United. He does have that goal threat. And now he's at Napoli and showing when utilized in the right role properly, he can be a massive difference maker at the top of the league. And he scored 2 goals against Torino on Sunday night to put Napoli 3 points clear at the top of Serie A. And he could well, in the next few weeks, go on and win a league title with Napoli. The way that it's going, you'd favor them. Inter have lost at home to Roma yesterday. They have got Barcelona in the Champions League over 2 legs. Napoli, I think they have a relatively favorable run in as well. And with Scott McTominay delivering, it's really looking up for him. So the point I'm trying to make here is that players that play or have played for Manchester United over the past few years that we have seen leave, don't be completely fooled. Don't be lured in by, like, not all of these United players are as bad as people would make them out. This is what I'm trying to say. And I think Marcus Rashford has fallen victim to that as well. He's left Aston Villa and has shown, I think it has been overblown a little bit, the impact that he's made, but I definitely think he's showing a lot more at Villa than he did at United. But I think that's more of a United problem than a player problem. And it's up to United, it's up to Ruben Amorim, it's up to Jason Wilcox, it's up to the people making the decisions at United to sort that out. They have to make sure that this is no longer a graveyard for players. But that doesn't mean that these players that are playing for the team at the moment, maybe there are some that need to leave, but for different reasons. In terms of quality, if these players are utilized in the right positions, the team, they fit into the team exactly suiting what they can contribute to the team, they are good players. And I think the market maybe has now I think, if anything, you can look at the McTominay deal and think it was a mistake that United sold him. Personally, I'm not in that camp. Personally, I think it was a necessary deal, as sad as it was for United. But I don't think what United wanted to do at the time was play a style which would have utilized Scott McTominay in the role that he's best in. So it was more of a call of desperation, in a sense, where McTominay was coming on, scoring late goals, this kind of thing. But at Napoli, they absolutely love him. It's just a case of he has now found a home which is absolutely perfect for him. I'm so glad that he has. And it's okay to say that it didn't work out in the end and that players need to leave and go and find a better atmosphere, find a better place for them, a home where they can start delivering consistently. And McTominay is proof here that that players who leave United, it's not necessarily all over for them. But the problem is United need to sort out their own culture and sort out what they do. And that wasn't that McTominay point wasn't necessarily in my planning and in my bullet points here for to talk about, but I just had to mention McTominay there because he's been so effective And I think you look at him, academy product, similar age to Rashford, played in the youth team with Rashford, played in the first team with Rashford, and was sold in the end. And he is making United look silly because he is delivering for Napoli. But I do think that the position that United are in, the position that will find themselves in this summer as well, about PSR and making sure that United have enough money to reinvest, is I think it maybe was still the right decision because United had to progress their team on. The problem that United have is that they made signings for a manager that they've since sacked. So would Scott McTominay work in this Ruben Amorim team, for example? I'm not entirely sure. I don't think he would. I don't think he necessarily would. As one of those 10s, I don't think he would. I think United are looking at more technical players who, like Mateus Cunha, for example, who United are trying to get their hands on. And that doesn't just because he's doing well elsewhere doesn't necessarily mean that he would have had that same fate at United. It can just be a case of it's better that this player moves on. And look, everybody can be happy in the end. United can get their money. And I think this is the case with Rashford as well. So I'm just going to dig in a little bit more to if Aston Villa could end up signing him permanently in a second. And I'll talk about some other clubs and some other options that he may have to join. But I'm just checking here if I need to mention anything else before I move on. I've done the United bit. Let's talk about Villa. Let's actually talk about Villa. So could they end up signing him permanently? Now, if just a couple of quick searches here, Villa bringing him in the first place on the money that they brought him in for was a massive surprise. I think everybody was really caught off guard by it, but it was a statement from Aston Villa to say that we mean business here and we want to make sure that we get into the Champions League next season by signing a player who has scored goals in the Champions League, who has a massive status in England. And they ended up bringing Marcus Rashford in on loan. But I think that the big thing for me at the time when it happened was how accurate these figures are. I'm not entirely sure, but it gives you a good benchmark. Marcus Rashford's earnings are almost double, including the earnings that Villa are giving him as part of their deal with United. Villa's top earners, Yuri Tielemans, Emi Martinez, and Boubacar Kamara, are all on £150,000 a week. And I've talked about Rashford's salary. They're paying a substantial chunk of this. So they brought him in, and he is by far and away their highest earning player. It upsets the apple cart completely. It shows that, well, I've talked about this a lot with other clubs as well. Breaking a wage structure is such an important decision to make. And if you end up doing it, it's got to be absolutely, completely worth it for a club. And Villa took the risk here and did it temporarily. But I think the fact that Villa lost that game at Man City last week and are now, I believe, they're 7th in the Premier League. Just going to double check that. They are obviously that defeat. I think they're now 4 points, 7th in the league. I think they're now 4 points off a Champions League place, or three points off a Champions League place, actually, because the 5th place gets a Champions League place. They play Fulham next. Chelsea go to Liverpool. Nottingham Forest play Brentford on Thursday. I think City, the way that they've gone about things, I think it looks as though they might end up getting in there. Newcastle look like they might end up getting in there, and Arsenal and Liverpool obviously are a bit further ahead. Without Rashford in the team, you look at it and you think that it might be a big risk for Villa. So Villa are definitely playing catch up. And I think any deal for Marcus Rashford to go to Aston Villa absolutely has to be contingent on Villa getting Champions League football. It has to be, simply because of the wage structure that I've just mentioned, and simply because of the fact that Villa themselves are running massive risks they're on the line for PSR. They have been, in the last 2-3 weeks, there was a report from The Guardian which emerged, which suggested that Villa are in talks with UEFA over a deal after a breach of squad cost rules. So if you're not, I'm sure you probably know, listen to this by now, about PSR and what PSR is. But there's a different rule in European football. There's a different rule which the Premier League was going to move towards, and it was about squad cost rules. It was there are certain levels, like certain percentages, 70, 80, and 90 odd percent. You can only there's a certain cap in terms of what you're expending on wages and squad costs in general versus your revenue. And I think Villa last season, when they were in the Conference League, were above that limit, and they've been talking to UEFA or talking to certain parties in the financial control body over a settlement because they breached those rules, and those rules are getting more stringent each year. So Villa are very much, I think they've taken a risk here with the moves that they made in January in order to get back into the Champions League. If they don't get in there, I think Villa are going to have a pretty difficult summer for themselves. So it really, really surprised me if they went and put up that 40 million quid for Marcus Rashford and, paid him the wages that I think Marcus Rashford would actually demand, because, like I say, he's so far above their highest earners that it would make a massive, massive statement for Villa to go and do it, and probably upset the apple cart as well. But I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll come back in a second to talk more about Aston Villa and talk more about some potential teams or some potential options that Marcus Rashford may have to join if he doesn't join Aston Villa and if he does leave Manchester United. Welcome back to the pod. Please subscribe if you've not done so already on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And also follow me on social media as well at @_ Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm also on Blue Sky. Link is in the description. Let's get back to the conversation that we were having about Aston Villa. I'll touch on them a little bit more because I think there's some interesting things around them which they really point to Villa and this deal not happening, even if they ended up qualifying for the Champions League, which at the moment looks unlikely. Things can obviously change, but I think they play Tottenham and Manchester United. Although that's either side of a Europa League final that could feature both teams. So maybe they do end up going and winning those games. Tottenham are certainly pretty bad at the moment. We'll see how that goes. But Villa certainly they probably need to win a 3 or 4 of their remaining games in order to get back into the Champions League, which is massive for them financially. You only have to look at Villa's behavior recently around the media reports that are coming out around what they are doing to look at it and think that they have issues with either squad cost rules or PSR. There's a report which is going, I think it emerged today again, but this came out a couple of weeks ago, that they're looking to sell a stake in their women's team in order to raise a bit of money. And that screams. Chelsea have just done it. They have their own issues. It screams that they are looking to raise revenue because they simply need to do it. It would really, really shock me if Villa took a deal of this size on. It really would. So look, I'm not saying it's impossible, but at the same time, the fact that this deal hasn't already been triggered, you only have to look back at what Marcus Rashford said when he joined Aston Villa as well. He was firm in saying that this is a loan until the end of the season. I'm sure he's going to take some time in order to consider his options, but the only way I can really see this happening is if Aston Villa extend this loan deal, which I don't think suits either Manchester United or suits the player himself. I think Marcus Rashford at 27 years old will want a permanent destination for himself. So I think what he's looking at as well is getting or joining a team in the Champions League. So what Villa do in the final weeks could potentially really move the needle on what Marcus Rashford does and whether he joins Aston Villa. But I think with all the financial issues, the FFP, PSR, squad cost rules, the wages and the wage structure, Marcus Rashford's earnings, the transfer fee, unless Villa are going and selling some big first-team players, Jacob Ramsey for one. I think Douglas Luiz is out on loan at Juventus, so maybe they could raise some cash there. But it would be quite unlikely for me. And the fact that Rashford is probably anticipated himself when he joined Villa in the first place that he would want to join a European giant. I think it's more likely that does happen. But obviously, we know that European giants don't have as much money these days as they used to have. And the old thing of joining Real Madrid or Barcelona only seems to be a thing that happens nowadays in Real Madrid's case anyway, they sign players on free transfers, or they sign players from South America for relatively small fortunes in football terms, but because they believe that these players can develop into some of the best players in the world. Like you take Vinny Jr., for example. But Marcus Rashford has had interest from a number of clubs in the past. That the PSG links have always been there. Saudi Arabia have been linked with Marcus Rashford. I seriously doubt that he'd want to move there, because we just talked about Champions League aspirations and this kind of thing. Some options potentially in the Premier League. I'm not entirely sure. You never know exactly what Chelsea are going to do. Newcastle United potentially. Maybe that could make sense for him. But I think this is complete speculation, by the way. I'm just there's no real tangible links at the moment, and it obviously I will follow up on the podcast about things as they do happen. But as it stands, we don't really know any teams who are willing to make this move. What I can talk about, though, is it more likely that these clubs will want to spend their money on Marcus Rashford after the Aston Villa loan spell? 17 matches, 10 goal contributions. I do think that Rashford has done enough in that time to make himself property. Well, I hate to refer to a player as property or whatever it is, but like relatively hot property of a player that could improve a team or a squad, especially a team or a squad competing for titles and this kind of thing. So I've always felt like, as bad as Barcelona's financial troubles have been over the last few years, that interest, and as much as you may see reports from, I don't know, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know how to pronounce this properly, but fichajes or something like that. My Spanish is terrible, but that essentially in Spanish translates to something like transfers, and you might see it on your social media timeline, this kind of thing. Anything you get from there, just ignore it. It's often complete nonsense. But that doesn't mean that interest from the likes of Barcelona isn't completely legit. I think there's suggestions in the past that Barcelona have, like Marcus Rashford. There have been some truth. There has been some truth to this, and it might be a big move and quite a surprising one, given Barcelona are doing so well and have the absolute one of the best front threes in world football at the moment. They're absolutely killing it. Rafinha, Lewandowski, Ferran Torres, obviously Lamine Yamal as well. They're scoring absolutely loads of goals. And where does Rashford actually fit into that? Would he be a squad player? Potentially. I think that's what you're looking at. Potentially a player who could fill in instead of Lewandowski, because he's getting on a little bit and may need to have his minutes managed as he goes forward. But I do think that I can't rule that one out yet, personally. I can't rule it out. It may come out in the future that that's absolutely a no-go, but I just got that nagging feeling that potentially we haven't seen the last of that yet, Marcus Rashford and Barcelona. And for one, I absolutely think that is the move that Marcus Rashford wants. Absolutely think that is the move that Marcus Rashford wants. Whether he gets it, we don't know at the moment, but it's I don't think it's one we can rule out just yet. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Paris Saint-Germain, I think, maybe is a different case. Both PSG and Barcelona could meet in a Champions League final, obviously, as we move forward in the next few weeks, and maybe prize money from a Champions League could end up, in Barcelona's case anyway, helping them to reinvest in the team as they go, even though they have so many troubles financially and registering players. But I never thought they'd be able to sign Dani Olmo, for example, and register him. They've had problems like that over the course of the last few months, but they always seem to get around it, don't they? But there's clubs in Italy as well. We've seen, I think Juventus have Randall Kolo Muani on loan at the moment, and we're not entirely sure yet whether they'll end up signing him. They potentially are looking at selling players like Dusan Vlahovic and Kenan Yildiz, and Juventus in general aren't doing all that well. I don't think, and they're not, for example, in touch with the league leaders or in a title race. Just checking where they are. Yeah, they're in fourth, so potentially they're looking relatively likely at the moment to be in that race for Champions League places, although Bologna have a game in hand on them and are 2 points behind. As I record this, I think they're playing tonight. So I think there are options. AC Milan, much further down, probably don't have the resources to go and make that deal happen. But I think you're looking at the likes of, there's clubs in Germany as well. Obviously, I think Borussia Dortmund have been linked with Rashford and had some interest in him previously. But they've shown with the likes of Jadon Sancho in the past that they don't really have the massive money to go and reinvest and have the wherewithal or the ability to cover wages as big as Rashford's and Sancho's have been. So we'll wait and see. Maybe there could be a surprise package coming out and making a statement and moving in for Marcus Rashford. But like Premier League clubs, potentially, maybe somebody else takes a bite. And we wait and see how that goes. But I think it's certainly the way that it looks, as much as I've just rambled on there a little bit. And like I say, complete speculation. We don't know yet who actually wants Marcus Rashford. It's just going to be a case of seeing how things play out over the course of the summer. But what I think we can definitely say from United's decision to loan out Marcus Rashford and Marcus Rashford's performances over the course of the last few months at Aston Villa, I do think that United's plan to send this player out on loan and re-establish his value has worked. It has worked to the point now where it's an easier sell. If United are looking to get rid of Marcus Rashford and sell him, it's certainly an easier sell now than it was in January. So you can look at what United have done there, what Rashford has done at Villa, and think that there's probably more of a market for him now than there was in January. And there was enough of a market for him in January, but not enough flexibility for clubs to go and make moves. So Rashford is 27 as well. Do I think there's a likely way back for him? I'd be surprised personally. I'm sure most people would be as well. But at 27, I think he was pretty honest at the start of the year. He wants a new challenge. He seems to have fallen out with Amorim, and a fresh start is probably the best route for him. And it probably favors United as well to go and try and find this money from somewhere else. But United have a long time in order to sort this deal out. But what United are looking to do, obviously, is bring players in as quickly as possible. Matheus Cunha is looking most likely at the moment to be the first signing. Hopefully we get some movement on that this week. Liam Delap is United are one of probably about 10 clubs or more who want to sign Liam Delap for 30-odd million quid. Whether that ends up happening remains to be seen, given the volume of interest in him. And I'll do a podcast on Liam Delap and Victor Osimhen at some point this week as well, talking about that. But what United will need to do, they have a certain pot of money as it stands at the moment. It's been made pretty clear from recent reports that United do have enough, albeit this deal for Cunha will be structured. They do have enough to go and sign Cunha potentially plus Delap before making any sales. So what can change there is if United know they're guaranteed Champions League football by winning the Europa League, that's another revenue stream that is open for next season. And obviously then a lot of things are contingent on player sales, and Jadon Sancho remains to be seen whether United will be in the same situation with Jadon Sancho. There's a deal in place or an obligation for Chelsea to sign Jadon Sancho for 25 million quid. It looked at one point as though that was 65 million quid essentially guaranteed for United to go into next season. Both of those cases now are up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen with Villa and Rashford. We don't know what's going to happen with Chelsea and Sancho. And Chelsea have a 5 million option to just go and send Sancho back to United and make him United's problem again on massive wages, which United will have a big challenge in shifting. And I think there's certainly much more of a market for Rashford at the moment than there is for Jadon Sancho, given he's not really done too much at Chelsea to the point where they're considering sending him back to United. But let me know what you think about this. I have talked about a lot around Rashford here. I do realize it's a relatively divisive topic because I think a lot of people do like Marcus Rashford and want it to work out for him. There's also a lot of people that want Marcus Rashford to just be sent, to just leave United completely and leave permanently, and for United to go and reinvest that money. And I think that's probably the most likely scenario to come out of this, but we don't know what's going to happen. I think Villa's recent defeat and elimination from the Champions League and the recent loss to Manchester City as well makes it a little less likely that Villa will get into the Champions League, and that could directly affect what they do in the market and directly affect what Marcus Rashford wants to do with his career as well. But let me know what you think in the comments. Get in touch on Spotify in the comment section. Get in touch on YouTube in the comment section as well, telling me what you think about Marcus Rashford and whether he will play for United again. How much could United expect more than 40 million for him now? Who knows? It remains to be seen. But what will Rashford do next? And has this loan at Aston Villa worked out for Marcus Rashford and for Manchester United as well? Get in the comments. Follow me on social media at @_Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And see you soon, everyone, for the next Promised Land podcast. Until next time, I've been Scott. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.